The crystal chandelier cast shadows across Adele's perfect face as she looked down at me, her champagne glass tilted at that precise angle she'd perfected over years of charity galas. "Oh, sweetie," she said, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. "It's so brave of you to keep pursuing your little art projects. I'm Avery, and I've spent 28 years being the other Powell sister, the one who didn't marry into old money, the one who paints murals in homeless shelters instead of hosting wine tastings, the one who apparently needed to be reminded of her place at every family gathering." "My latest project was actually featured in the city's art walk," I said, forcing a smile. "Over 10,000 people saw it last weekend." Adele's perfectly manicured hand touched my shoulder. "That's nice, dear. Though I suppose any exposure is good exposure when you're starting out. Speaking of which, Patrick and I would love to help you with rent again this month." "I haven't needed your help in 2 years," I cut in, my cheeks burning. The grand ballroom of the Powell family estate suddenly felt suffocating. "My commissions more than cover my expenses." "Really?" Adele's eyebrows arched. "But Cadence mentioned seeing you at that discount grocery store." I spotted Cadence across the room, my best friend looking apologetic as she mouthed, "I'm sorry." She'd bumped into Adele at some society function last week, and clearly my sister had been fishing for information. "I shop there because they partner with local food banks," I said. "You know, the ones where I volunteer?" "Oh, darling, you're such a charity case." Adele laughed, that tinkling sound that always reminded me of breaking glass. Always trying to prove something. When will you accept that some of us are simply meant for greater things? The champagne in my glass trembled. 28 years of being diminished, dismissed, treated like some kind of cautionary tale. I watched Adele smoothing her $1,000 dress, and something inside me snapped. "You really think my life is so beneath you?" I asked quietly. "Well," Adele gestured vaguely at my thrift store cocktail dress, then switched with me. "I'm sorry, what?" "One day. You live my life, I'll live yours. Since mine is so simple and yours is so grand, it should be easy for you, right?" Adele's perfect smile faltered. "Don't be ridiculous." "What's ridiculous about it? Afraid you can't handle a day of honest work?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Or maybe you're worried I'll do better in your world than you would in mine." "Is everything all right here?" Patrick appeared beside us, his hand settling on Adele's waist. "Your wife just called me a charity case," I said brightly. "So I suggested we swap lives for a day, so she can see how the other half lives." Patrick's eyebrows shot up. "That's different." "It's absurd," Adele snapped. "Is it?" I pressed. "One day. You handle my shelter mural project. I'll take your lunch meeting with the hospital board. Unless you're scared." I saw it then, that flicker of pride that had always been Adele's weakness. The same pride that had driven her to outshine me at every turn since childhood. "Fine," she said suddenly. "Tomorrow. We'll swap schedules, duties, everything. And when I excel at your little painting project, maybe you'll finally admit that some people are just naturally superior at everything they do." "Perfect." I pulled out my phone. "I'll text you the shelter's address. Be there at 7 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind getting paint on." I turned to Patrick. "And I assume you'll make sure she follows through?" He nodded, looking more amused than concerned. "I'll even drive her there myself." "This is insane," Adele muttered, but I could see her mind already working, probably imagining how she'd prove herself better at my life than me. "One more thing," I added. "No backing out, no shortcuts. We both fully commit to living each other's lives for the entire day. Deal?" Adele's eyes narrowed. "Deal." As I walked away, Cadence fell into step beside me. "Holy shit," she whispered. "Are you really going through with this?" I watched Adele across the room, already bragging to our cousins about how she'd show me up tomorrow. "Yes," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "It's time my sister learned what it really means to walk in someone else's shoes." "And what about you? Are you ready to step into her world?" I finished my champagne in one gulp. I've spent my whole life being told I'm not good enough for that world. Tomorrow, we'll see if that's true. The chandelier lights flickered overhead, casting new shadows across the ballroom floor. For the first time in years, I felt something other than resignation when looking at my sister. Tomorrow would change everything. I just didn't know yet how much. "You can't seriously expect me to wear this," Adele said, holding up my paint-splattered overalls like they might bite her. We stood in my small apartment's living room at 6:30 a.m., Cadence watching from my worn leather couch with poorly concealed amusement. "Those are my work clothes," I said, already dressed in one of Adele's designer suits that she'd brought over. "The shelter kids helped paint them last month. They're practically a badge of honor. They're practically a health hazard." But Adele disappeared into my bathroom to change, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. Cadence leaned forward. "Are you sure about this? She could really mess things up at the shelter." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," I whispered back. "Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can see the light." Adele emerged, tugging at the overalls. "This is degrading." "Here's your schedule," I said, handing her a notebook. "The shelter expects you at 7 a.m. sharp. You'll be working with 6 teenagers to complete the ocean mural in the dining area. Their names and preferred colors are listed there. I haven't painted since elementary school. Then today will be educational." I smoothed down my borrowed silk blouse. "Meanwhile, I have your 9 a.m. hospital board meeting, followed by lunch with Margaret at LeBlanc, and the afternoon charity committee meeting at the country club." "The hospital board is voting on the new children's wing budget," Adele said sharply. "You can't possibly—" "Handle it?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like you can't possibly handle painting with homeless teens. Funny how that works." Patrick cleared his throat from the doorway. "I've got the car running. We should go if we're going to make it by 7. "One more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "We document everything. Photos, videos, whatever it takes to prove we're actually doing this. No cheating." "Fine." Adele grabbed her phone. "But when this is over, you'll never question my capabilities again." "That's the idea," I murmured. After they left, Cadence turned to me. "Okay, spill. What's your real plan here?" I checked my makeup in the mirror, making sure I looked the part of a society wife. "Adele thinks she can breeze in there and prove she's better than everyone, including the shelter kids. But Gus will be there today." "Gus? The one who ran away from his wealthy family after they rejected him for being gay. The one who understands exactly what it means to be dismissed by people like my sister." I smiled. "He's also our most talented artist." "You're evil," Cadence grinned. "Brilliant, but evil." "I learned from the best. Adele's spent years orchestrating situations to make me look bad. Time for a taste of her own medicine." I checked my watch. "I should go. The hospital board won't wait." "And you're sure you can handle that?" I pulled out a folder. "What Adele doesn't know is that I've been volunteering at that hospital for months. The night shift nurses have told me everything about the budget issues. Plus, I have something she doesn't." "What's that?" "I actually care about the people this will affect." I grabbed my borrowed designer bag. "Watch the shelter's security cameras if you can. I have a feeling today's art session will be educational." "Wait," Cadence called as I reached the door. "What if this backfires? What if she actually does well?" I paused, thinking about the text I'd sent Gus last night, explaining everything. "Trust me," I said. "By the end of today, either Adele will learn some humility, or I'll learn I've been wrong about her all along. Either way, something's going to change." "And the hospital board? The charity committee?" "You know what the difference is between painting a mural and playing society politics?" I asked, checking my reflection one last time. "With a mural, at least you can see the mess you're making. These people hide their mess behind designer labels and fake smiles. But mess is mess, and I've gotten pretty good at cleaning those up." My phone buzzed. A message from Gus. "She's here, looking like she'd rather eat glass than touch a paintbrush. This should be fun." I smiled, typing back, "Remember the plan. Let her think she's in control until she isn't." "You're enjoying this too much," Cadence said, reading over my shoulder. "Maybe," I admitted, "but sometimes the only way to teach empathy is to force someone to live in another person's world. Adele's about to learn that her perfect life isn't the only one that matters." I headed out, my borrowed heels clicking against the pavement, already imagining Adele facing her first real challenge at the shelter. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Gus showing my sister staring in horror at a wall of paint supplies. "Game on, sis," I muttered, sliding into my Uber. Let's see who really can't handle whose life. The city stretched out before me, a maze of high-rises and hidden alleys, of penthouses and shelters. Somewhere in there, my sister was about to learn what it meant to truly see people. And I was about to learn if I could beat her at her own game. Either way, by sunset, nothing would be the same. The texts from Gus kept coming as I sat through the hospital board meeting. Each one was better than the last. She tried to delegate painting to a 12-year-old. Kid told her that's not how it works. She just complained about the paint fumes, wearing the mask wrong. OMG, she just asked if we have a cappuccino machine. I forced myself to focus on the budget presentation, but my mind kept drifting to the shelter. The live security feed on my phone showed Adele standing awkwardly before the half-finished ocean mural, surrounded by teenagers who clearly weren't buying her attempted authority. "Mrs. Gray," the board chairman's voice snapped me back to attention. "Your thoughts on the proposed budget cuts to the children's wing?" I straightened in my chair, channeling every ounce of Adele's confidence. "Actually, I've been reviewing the numbers, and I believe we're approaching this from the wrong angle." The chairman's eyebrows rose. I pulled out the documents I'd prepared, thanking those late-night conversations with the nurses. "Instead of cutting services, we should be looking at administrative redundancies. For example," I launched into my presentation, watching faces shift from skepticism to interest. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a video from Gus. "I simply don't understand." Adele's voice rang clear through the shelter's dining hall. "Why can't we just hire professional painters?" "Because this isn't about the painting," Gus's voice replied off camera. "It's about giving us a voice, a way to show we exist. But surely there are more efficient..." "Efficient?" The camera panned to show Gus stepping forward, paint-stained hands on his hips. "Let me tell you about efficient, Mrs. Gray. My parents were all about efficiency. When I came out, they efficiently packed my bags, efficiently closed my bank accounts, and efficiently erased me from their lives. This mural? It's not about efficiency. It's about being seen." The video ended there. I smiled, tucking my phone away as the board members discussed my proposal. Gus was doing exactly what I'd hoped, making it personal. Another text. "She's actually picking up a brush now, looking terrified." The board meeting ended with a unanimous vote to explore my alternative budget proposal. As I gathered my things, the chairman approached. "Remarkable presentation, Mrs. Gray. I don't think I've ever seen you so passionate about the details before." I channeled Adele's signature laugh. "Sometimes we need a fresh perspective." My phone lit up with a new video. This time, Adele was actually painting. Her designer watch safely stored away, sleeves rolled up. A young girl was guiding her hand, showing her how to blend colors for the ocean waves. "See?" the girl was saying. "It's like makeup. You gotta blend it just right." I never thought of it that way," Adele replied, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Yeah, well, there's a lot of things people don't think about until they have to," Gus said off camera. "Like where to sleep when it's raining, or how to make $3 last 2 days. The camera caught Adele's flinch, the way her hand hesitated over the wall. Is that what happened to you?" "Nah," Gus replied. "I got lucky. Found this place. Found Avery. Some kids don't." Another text followed. "She's been quiet for the last hour. Actually working. Something's happening here." I headed to LeBlanc for Adele's lunch meeting, but my mind was at the shelter. I'd known Gus would be the key, someone from Adele's world who'd seen the other side. Someone who could bridge that gap. My phone chimed again. This time it was from Adele herself. "How do you do this every day?" I typed back, "Do what?" "Listen to their stories. Help them. Not break down." "Who says I don't break down?" There was a long pause before her response. "The ocean still looks terrible." "It's not about the ocean. I'm starting to get that." I smiled, tucking my phone away as I entered LeBlanc. Margaret was waiting, eyeing me with the practiced scrutiny of a society maven. Darling, she air-kissed my cheeks. That suit is absolutely you. Though I could have sworn Adele wore it last month. Good fashion deserves an encore, I replied smoothly, sitting down. My phone buzzed one final time. The photo showed Adele sitting cross-legged on the floor with the teenagers, her perfect hair messy with paint, actually laughing at something Gus had said. Everything all right? Margaret asked, noting my expression. Perfect, I replied, tucking the phone away. Just perfect. The maitre d' approached with menus, and I straightened my shoulders. I had my own performance to maintain, my own lessons to teach. But somewhere across town, my sister was learning that some walls aren't meant to be maintained. They're meant to be painted over, transformed into something new. And sometimes the most important transformations happen when you least expect them. So tell me, darling, Margaret swirled her wine glass, how is the new pediatric wing campaign coming along? The hospital board meeting must have been illuminating. The way she emphasized that last word made it clear. She knew something was off. I took a careful sip of water, buying time. Actually, we made excellent progress today. The board unanimously approved exploring my alternative budget proposal. Margaret's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched. Did they now? How unexpected. Especially since you've opposed every change to the existing structure for the past 2 years. Damn, I hadn't known that detail about Adele. Sometimes we need to challenge our own perspectives, I said smoothly. Speaking of which, how's your son doing at his new school? Margaret's face tightened. Direct hit. Cadence had mentioned her son's recent expulsion was a sore subject. Let's not discuss Thomas, she said curtly. I'm more interested in why you're suddenly channeling your sister's bleeding heart approach to charity. My phone buzzed, another text from Gus. Your sister just shared her lunch with kids. Actual tears when one told her about sleeping in the park. Everything all right? Margaret asked, eyeing my phone. You seem distracted. Just checking on a project, I replied, tucking the phone away. You know how it is. Always something requiring attention. Indeed. Margaret leaned forward, her voice dropping. Like the attention you're drawing to yourself today, the board members are already talking. Since when does Adele Gray care about administrative efficiency? Perhaps you don't know me as well as you think. Oh, but I do. Her smile turned predatory. Just as I know that's your sister's Valentino suit from last month's charity gala. The same sister who's currently finger painting with homeless children instead of attending her regular Wednesday art committee meeting. My stomach dropped. Of course, the art committee. I'd missed it in Adele's schedule. So, Margaret continued, would you like to explain what game you're playing, Avery, or should I make a few calls and let everyone know about this little experiment? I set down my fork, meeting her gaze. Go ahead. Call them. Tell them how the less accomplished sister managed to get the board to unanimously approve a budget proposal that Adele's been fighting for 2 years. Tell them how the charity case is sitting here in LeBlanc, holding her own. I'm sure that won't reflect poorly on Adele at all. Margaret's smile faltered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Patrick, Adele sitting in a circle with the shelter kids, her designer watch replaced by paint-stained hands, actually listening as they talked. I turned the phone to show Margaret. Or tell them about this, about how Adele's finally seeing the people she claims to help through all those charity galas. I'm sure the society pages would love that story. You're blackmailing me? I'm offering you a choice. You can expose us and watch both your friend's reputation and your own social standing take a hit. Or, I paused, channeling every ounce of Adele's confidence. You can help me make this mean something. Make what mean something? Change, real change. Not just writing checks at galas, but actually seeing the people we claim to help. Like your son, wouldn't it be nice if someone had really seen him, understood him, before things got so bad? Margaret's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine. You're not at all what I expected, she said finally. Neither are the kids at the shelter, neither is Adele, apparently. I showed her another incoming photo, my sister helping a teenage girl mix colors, both of them laughing. What do you want from me? Support. When this day is over, things are going to change. I need someone in Adele's circle who understands why. Margaret studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You know, I always wondered why Adele spoke about you with such defensiveness. Now I understand. You're what she could have been, if she hadn't been so afraid of disappointing everyone. She's learning, I said, as another text came in. She's asking about funding art therapy programs. Think we broke her. Margaret raised her glass. To seeing people clearly. I clinked my water glass against her wine. To second chances. And Avery? She caught my arm as I stood to leave. The next time you want to infiltrate our world, remember, Adele never orders water at lunch. Always Chablis. I laughed. I'll keep that in mind. As I headed to the next meeting on Adele's schedule, my phone lit up with a message from my sister. I think I understand now. Why you do this. Why it matters. I typed back. Keep painting. We're not done yet. The afternoon sun caught the buildings downtown, turning the windows into mirrors. Somewhere in there, Adele was learning to see past her own reflection. And here I was, wearing her life like a borrowed coat, finding it fit better than anyone had expected. The day wasn't over, but already the cracks in our carefully constructed worlds were starting to show. And through those cracks, something new was beginning to shine. The charity committee meeting was winding down when Gus's most explosive text arrived. Your sister just wrote a personal check for art supplies, and she's crying in the supply closet. Everything all right, Mrs. Gray? Asked the committee chairwoman as I fumbled with my phone. Actually, no, I said, standing up. I need to go check on something at the shelter. The homeless shelter? Someone tittered. Whatever for. I thought of all the times I'd heard that same dismissive tone from Adele. Because some things matter more than table arrangements for the spring gala. Leaving them whispering behind me, I grabbed an Uber to the shelter. The scene I walked into stopped me in my tracks. Adele sat on the floor, surrounded by teenagers and paint supplies, her designer blouse stained with blues and greens. Her perfect hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes were red-rimmed. You can't live in your car, she was saying to a young girl. Not in this weather. There has to be another option. Like what? The girl asked. The waiting list for beds here is 3 months long. Then we'll find you somewhere else. I know people, I can... Adele looked up and saw me. Avery, thank God, I need your help. Mrs. Gray's been telling us about your fancy parties, Gus said, shooting me a knowing look. About how much money gets spent on centerpieces. $10,000, Adele whispered, for flowers that die in a day, while Sarah's been sleeping in her car for 2 weeks. I sat down beside them, careful not to get paint on my borrowed suit. The mural's looking good. The mural doesn't matter, Adele burst out. How can you stand it, knowing all this is happening while people like me, people like I was, just keep planning parties and pretending none of this exists? Because sometimes, I said quietly, the only way to change things is to work from both sides. Sarah, the girl living in her car, looked between us. Are you two having some kind of rich people crisis? Gus snorted. They're sisters, doing some kind of life swap thing. Wait, Sarah said. So you're the one who usually does this? She pointed at me. And you're the fancy one? She turned to Adele. I'm the one who's been an idiot, Adele said, wiping her eyes. God, Avery, how do you do this? How do you hear these stories and not just break? Who says I don't? I picked up a paintbrush. But breaking isn't always bad. Sometimes you need to break before you can rebuild something better. Like this wall? Sarah gestured to the mural. Because, no offense, but that whale looks kind of drunk. It's abstract, Adele said defensively, then laughed. A real laugh, not her usual society tinkle. Okay, it's terrible, but I'm learning. Yeah, Gus said. You are. My phone buzzed. Margaret. The committee is in an uproar over your exit. Also, I may have mentioned Thomas is interested in art therapy now. Funny how things work out. Speaking of learning, I said, how would you feel about expanding the art program here? Maybe with some professional instruction? Yes, Adele said immediately. God, yes. These kids have so much talent, they just need resources and... She stopped, realization dawning. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? What plan? Sarah asked. My sister, Adele said. Just pulled off the most elaborate intervention I've ever seen. Did it work? I asked softly. Adele looked around at the paint-splattered teens, at the mural with its wobbly wail, at her own stained hands. I can't go back, she whispered. I can't just go back to pretending. Good, Gus said, because we need more people who refuse to pretend. Also, Sarah added, we need someone to fix that wail. It's seriously depressing. We all laughed, and for the first time in years, I saw my sister's real smile. Not the practiced one she wore at parties, but the one I remembered from when we were kids, before society expectations had built walls between us. I have one condition, Adele said, turning to me. You have to stop pretending, too. Pretending what? That you're less than them, less than me. You walked into my world today and owned it. The board members are still talking about your presentation. Sounds like you two have a lot to figure out, Gus said, standing up. But first, can we please fix that whale? It's starting to look like it's having an existential crisis. Just like its painter, Adele murmured, reaching for a brush. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. My phone buzzed one last time. Patrick. The hospital called. They want to fast-track the new budget proposal. Whatever you two are doing, keep doing it. I looked at my sister, covered in paint, and finally seeing clearly. Oh, we will, I said. We definitely will. The sun was setting when Patrick arrived at the shelter, casting long shadows across our nearly finished mural. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene, his perfectly polished wife sitting cross-legged on the floor, teaching Sarah how to blend colors, while I organized an impromptu art supply inventory with Gus. Well, he said, this is different. Patrick! Adele jumped up, then seemed to remember her paint-covered state. I'm sorry, I'm a mess. You're beautiful, he said quietly. I haven't seen you this alive in years. She stopped, paint-stained hands frozen mid-gesture. I've been making calls about Sarah's situation and the other kids. Did you know the waiting list for beds here is 3 months long? I didn't. Patrick looked around the room. But something tells me I'm about to learn a lot more about it. We need to do something, Adele said. Not just throw money at it, but actually do something. Like what? Like this, she gestured to the mural. Art therapy programs, job training, real support, not just charity galas where we congratulate ourselves for writing checks. Patrick turned to me. And you? How was your day in our world? Educational, I said. Your wife's friends are interesting. Terrifying, you mean? Adele corrected. God, was I really like that? That dismissive? Speaking of dismissive, Patrick pulled out his phone. The hospital board called. They're implementing your budget proposals immediately, Avery. Apparently, you made quite an impression. What proposals? Adele asked. The ones your sister designed to save the children's wing while cutting administrative waste. The same proposals you've been fighting for 2 years. Adele's eyes widened. You did that? In one meeting? Turns out, I said, when you actually care about the outcome more than the politics, people listen. Mrs. Gray? Sarah approached tentatively. We're ready for the final touches on the whale. You promised to help. Go, Patrick said. I need to talk to your sister anyway. As Adele followed Sarah back to the mural, Patrick turned to me. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? Not all of it, I admitted. I didn't expect her to actually care. You don't give her enough credit, or maybe we haven't given her enough chances. He watched his wife laugh with the teenagers. She was different when we first met, you know, before society expectations and family pressure crushed her real self. And now? Now I'm seeing that girl again, the one who used to paint for fun, who wanted to change the world. He smiled. Thank you for that. Don't thank me yet, I said. The day's not over. Actually, Gus interrupted, it kind of is. Shelter's closing in 10 minutes. Adele looked up from the mural, panic crossing her face. But what about Sarah? Her car? Already handled, Patrick said. I called in a favor. There's a room at the women's shelter across town. Cars waiting outside to take her. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really, Patrick confirmed. and tomorrow we're going to start working on a more permanent solution. See? Gus nudged me. Sometimes rich people can be useful. I heard that, Adele called, adding final touches to the wail. And you're right. We can be useful when we actually try. She stepped back, surveying the mural. It's still not perfect. It's not supposed to be, I said. It's supposed to be real. As the kids started cleaning up, Patrick pulled me aside again. There's one more event on Adele's schedule, the sunset cocktail party at the country club. I know, I should get changed. Actually, he smiled, I think it's time for the real Adele to make an appearance, paint stains and all. Adele overheard and froze. You can't be serious. Margaret and the others would see exactly who you've chosen to be, I finished, unless you're not ready for that. She looked down at her paint-covered overalls, then at Sarah packing up her few belongings for the women's shelter, and finally at the mural, imperfect but somehow more beautiful for its flaws. You know what? She said. I think I am ready, but only if you come with me, both versions of us, exactly as we are. Both versions? Gus asked. My sister in her borrowed designer suit, showing she belongs in any world she chooses, Adele said, and me in my paint-stained clothes, finally being real. The society pages will explode, Patrick warned, but he was smiling. Good, Adele and I said simultaneously. As we headed for the door, Sarah called out, Hey, rich people, we turned. Thanks, she said simply, for seeing us. Adele's eyes welled up again. Thank you for helping me see myself. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in colors we'd spent all day trying to capture on the shelter walls. Patrick's driver held the car door open, trying not to react to Adele's appearance. Ready? I asked my sister. She squared her shoulders, paint-stained and proud. Ready to change everything. The country club valet's face was priceless when our car pulled up. Adele stepped out first, paint-stained overalls and all, head held high. I followed in her borrowed designer suit, and Patrick brought up the rear, looking entirely too amused. Mrs. Gray? The valet stammered. Is everything? Everything is perfect, Thomas, Adele said, handing him her keys. How's your mother doing? Still working 2 jobs to put your sister through college? The valet's mouth fell open. In all the years she'd been coming here, she'd never asked about his family before. Inside, conversation stuttered to a halt as we entered the sunset cocktail party. Margaret, bless her scheming heart, recovered first. Adele, darling, she air-kissed my sister's cheek, ignoring the paint smudges. How avant-garde, is this some sort of performance art? Actually, Adele said loudly enough for everyone to hear, this is what reality looks like. When you spend a day actually helping people instead of just talking about it at parties. The silence turned arctic. Patrick stepped forward. Honey, maybe we should... No, Adele cut him off. I need to say this. She grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter and clinked it with a spoon. Everyone, I have an announcement to make. Adele, a woman in Chanel whispered urgently, you're having some sort of breakdown. I'm having an awakening, Adele corrected. My sister taught me that today. All eyes turned to me. I straightened my borrowed Valentino and smiled. You all know my sister Avery, Adele continued, the one we've all politely dismissed as the family charity case. Well, today, she ran a hospital board meeting so brilliantly they're implementing her proposals immediately. The same proposals I've failed to push through for 2 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Meanwhile, she gestured to her paint-stained clothes. I spent the day at her homeless shelter, where I met actual humans with actual stories that would break your hearts, if you ever bothered to listen. Darling, someone called out, perhaps you've had too much sun. I met a girl today who's been sleeping in her car, Adele's voice cracked, while we spent $10,000 on flowers for last month's gala. Do you know what $10,000 could do at that shelter? Margaret stepped forward. I think what Adele is trying to say is that I'm done, Adele finished. Done pretending, done playing these games. My sister showed me what real impact looks like, and I can't go back to this performance. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. I saw phones being pulled out, society gossip already spreading. So here's my proposal, Adele raised her glass. Instead of next month's gala, we're having an art show, featuring works by the shelter's residents. and every penny goes directly to expanding their programs. You can't be serious, someone scoffed. Watch me. Adele's voice was steel. And if you don't like it, you can find another charity chair. One who's better at pretending none of this matters. Patrick cleared his throat. I'll match whatever we raise, dollar for dollar. As will I, Margaret added, shooting me a wink. The crowd buzzed. Money talked, even if the message made them uncomfortable. One more thing, Adele said. Avery, the hospital board wants you to join permanently, as my replacement. What? I nearly dropped my drink. You earned it, just like I need to earn my place in your world if you'll let me. Our worlds, I corrected. No more divisions. Adele smiled, paint flaking from her cheek. No more divisions. The party dissolved into chaos after that, half the guests fleeing in scandal, the other half clustering around to hear more about the art show plans. Through it all, Adele stood firm, answering questions about the shelter with newfound authority. Well played, Margaret murmured, appearing at my elbow. Though I suspect this wasn't quite what you planned. Not even close, I admitted. I thought she'd break, but I never expected her to. Become real? Margaret smiled. Sometimes the best revenge is giving someone the chance to be their true self. My phone buzzed, a text from Gus. Sarah's settled at the women's shelter. They have an art therapy program. She's already asking about teaching others. I showed the message to Adele, who immediately teared up again. You know, she said, I always thought you were trying to embarrass the family with your charity work. I never realized you were trying to save it. Not save, I corrected. Transform. Mission accomplished, Patrick said, watching as his wife enthusiastically described the shelter's needs to a wealthy donor. The sunset painted the country club windows gold, not unlike the shelter's walls. Two worlds, finally merging into something new. Something real. Ready to go home? I asked Adele. She looked down at her paint-stained clothes, then at the glittering crowd, and smiled. I think I finally am. The morning sun streamed through the shelter's windows as I added the final touches to our newest mural. This one featured a phoenix rising from city buildings, its wings spanning the entire wall. The symbolism's a bit on the nose, don't you think? Adele said, walking in with 2 coffee cups. She handed me one, careful not to drip on her paint-splattered designer overalls, a custom-made set she'd ordered after ruining mine. Says the woman who showed up to the hospital board meeting in a Valentino paint smock. That was different, she protested. I was making a statement. And what a statement it was. I stepped back to survey the mural. Though not as powerful as the donors' faces when Sarah presented her art therapy proposal. That girl's going places, Adele said proudly. The foundation already approved her pilot program for 3 more shelters. The foundation, Adele's latest project, born from that day we switched lives. She'd transformed her society connections into actual change, while I'd learned to navigate boardrooms without losing my soul. Speaking of going places, I nodded toward the door where Gus stood, dressed in a crisp new suit. Ready for your first day of work, Mr. Program Director? Don't remind me, he groaned. I still can't believe you 2 talked me into this. You talked yourself into it, Adele corrected. We just provided the funding. And the suit, I added. And the office, Adele chimed in. And the... Okay, Gus laughed. I get it. You're both terrible influences. Patrick appeared behind him carrying boxes of art supplies. The terrible influences who just got city approval for the youth housing project. Really? I turned to Adele. You didn't tell me. I wanted to surprise you, she said. Consider it payback for all your surprises. Does this mean I have to switch lives with you again? God, no, she shuddered. Once was enough. Though, she looked around the shelter's transformed space. Maybe we needed that once. Sarah burst through the door, waving a paper. I got in. The art therapy certification program, they accepted me. Adele rushed to hug her, not caring about the paint transfer. Of course they did. Did you show them your portfolio? The one with the drunk whale? Never. Hey, Adele protested. That whale had character. That whale had issues, Gus corrected. Just like we all did. Patrick checked his watch. Ladies, the press conference starts in an hour. Should we head over? Ah, yes, the press conference, where we'd announce the merger of Adele's foundation with my shelter programs, creating something entirely new, something real. Just let me change first, Adele said. Don't you dare, I warned. Paint-stained overalls or nothing. Fine, she sighed dramatically, but you have to wear the Valentino. Deal. As the others headed out, Adele held me back. You know, I never thanked you properly. For what? Humiliating you? Forcing you to paint badly? Making you cry in a supply closet? For seeing me, she said quietly. The real me, buried under all that pretense. For giving me a chance to be more than what everyone expected. You did the same for me, I pointed out. All those society doors that were closed? You didn't just open them, you knocked them down. We make a good team. A terrifying team, according to Margaret. Margaret's just mad because we're actually getting things done instead of just talking about it at parties. Through the window, we could see Sarah showing Gus her acceptance letter, Patrick beaming proudly, and a group of teens starting work on a new mural section. You know what the best revenge is? I asked. Living well? No, I smiled. It's watching the person who hurt you become better because of what you did. Watching them grow into someone you're proud to know. Even if that person was a stuck-up, pretentious, society-obsessed big sister. Especially then. Adele linked her arm through mine. Come on, let's go scandalize some reporters with our paint-stained solidarity. As we walked out into the sunshine, I thought about that day that changed everything. About broken walls and painted whales, about sisters and second chances, about revenge that turned into redemption. Ready? Adele asked at the car. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, paint in her hair, determination in her eyes, and not a trace of that society mask she used to wear. Ready, I said, because sometimes the best endings aren't endings at all. They're beginnings in disguise, painted in colors we never knew we had, telling stories we never knew we could tell. And sometimes, just sometimes, those stories turn out better than any revenge we could have planned.